Now I move on and talk about the 1995 Royal Rumble. This ends actually a little bit of a hidden gem there. This wasn't that bad of a pay-per-view. I actually enjoyed it a little bit. There are a couple of matches where I didn't particularly enjoy the finish, but I did think that the main event of the show, the Royal Rumble match, was definitely the match of the night. One of the more memorable Royal Rumbles, where it was basically two people and then 28 other jabronis that interfered in the fun for me, in my opinion, anyways. But we'll talk about that in a moment. The show kicked off with a match over the Intercontinental Championship. And I know what a lot of you are going to say. Assume the position, da da da. No, I'm not doing that. Damn it. Here's what I will say. I always felt like the WWF and then later WCW, consequently, would always do everything they could to try and pound Jeff Jarrett into a fucking certain spot because he was a promoter's son. That's the way I always looked at it. And to me, when I look at this match between him and Razor Ramon, I look at this as a clear-cut example of trying to pound and pound and pound and pound Jeff Jarrett into being something he wasn't, which was a star. Clearly wasn't. Kind of cool to go back and see Road Dogg with him as the roadie, though. I will say that. But this was a really good, in terms of a match itself, a really good match between Jeff Jarrett and Razor Ramon. I do like how the finish was done, even though I think the wrong person won. In the fact that Razor Ramon's knee was hurting him, so he tried to get Jeff Jarrett up in the Razor's Edge, but he buckled under the weight, and that allowed Jeff Jarrett to pick up the win. But a really good opening match, a really good Intercontinental Championship match. That's sometimes what I like about the Royal Rumble, is that it is a chance for some of the mid-card and undercard guys, because most years you're only going to have 4 or 5 or 6 matches on the Royal Rumble show. As a result, it gives some of those mid-card and undercard guys more of a chance to shine. And that's what this allows you to do with like a Jeff Jarrett and a Razor Ramon here. It allows them to be showcased. It allows them to shine. You get a lot of time in their match, and you're able to tell a very good story, which this match ultimately did, even if I don't like the finish. Now, the next match I thought was kind of a dud, frankly, was The Undertaker versus Erwin R. Shyster, IRS. And even though Taker won, the whole thing about the Druids being there and shaking the ropes and all this other bullshit. Yeah. And then King Kong Bundy coming and stealing the urn, which was supposed to take Undertaker's power, which that became a story with DiBiase's family there for the next few months, and that led to Taker having to unfortunately wrestle King Kong Bundy at WrestleMania 11. Oh, God. Oh, God. Is all I got to say. In this match, all I got to say is, oh, God. Hey, credit to Mike Rotundo, Erwin R. Shyster. Got himself a pay-per-view match, a Big Four pay-per-view match at that with The Undertaker, so life isn't too bad. Right in the middle of the show, you got a match that I still feel to this day is one of Diesel, Kevin Nash's best matches ever, and that's him versus Bret Hart for the WWF Championship. This match, minus the finish, was really, really, really good. I mean, really good. To me, Bret Hart and Kevin Nash, I thought, worked really well in the ring together. That could be a lot of credit to Bret Hart structuring the match to make himself look good and also make his opponent look good, working to Diesel's strengths, masking his negatives or weaknesses, accentuating the positives, which is always key. And then Diesel keeping it simple, doing just enough to accentuate his strengths and, accentuate Bret Hart's strengths at the same time. This was a really damn good match. It was just a shame that they couldn't have a decisive finish in some way. And you have, Mr. Backlund and Owen Hart coming out and interfering with Bret Hart, and then you've got people running out and interfering with Diesel, and it ends up in a draw, and it's just kind of like, man, what a shame that this was the direction they decided to go with this match, and you couldn't have a decisive or clean or even non-clean, ultimate finish. It really is a shame because this match was really good. It was. You don't say that a lot about Kevin Nash matches. I'll grant you that. But this is definitely one of them. And like I said, I think this is a signature match for him and just another day at the office, frankly, for Bret the Hitman Hart. The next match was a tag team match for the vacant WWF Tag Team Championships. And this was another good match here. Bob Holly, Spark Plug Bob Holly, and the 1-2-3 Kid defeat Tatanka and Bam Bam Bigelow. Oh, God. But again, a really good match. I always think Tatanka gets a little disrespected. Doesn't quite get the respect that he deserves. I was a fan of Tatanka back in the day. I actually was. And I always argue that if Tatanka would have been there a few years earlier, during the mid to late 80s, during the height of the Hogan era, Tatanka would have been a huge star. He was over. Imagine how over he would have been when you had the cartoon and you had all of this going on and you had all the mainstream exposure you were getting. Tatanka, I think, could have been a huge star for that company, a top five babyface, no question about it, during the height of that company. I truly believe that. Then you sit there and by 95, you've got him heel, you've got him aligned with DiBiase. It's like, what the hell are you doing? What's going on here? Come on, man. And then Bam Bam Bigelow, I always have a tremendous amount of respect for because, he's one of those guys that I think was one of the great big man workers of all time. A guy that was, over 300 pounds, but he could sit there and do all types of top rope stuff. He was phenomenal. He was absolutely phenomenal. And of course, here was where they really started to tease the hostilities and the animosity between him and Lawrence Taylor, setting up to their main event match at WrestleMania 11, which I think is a signature crown jewel in Bam Bam Bigelow's cap. And I think, to me, epitomizes why it's a crime that Bam Bam Bigelow is not in the WWE Hall of Fame. But a really good tag match here, of course. Bob Holly and the 1-2-3 Kid were tag champs for an entire day until they lost the belts the next night to the Smoking Guns. But hey, it is what it is. And then we get to the Royal Rumble match itself. And one thing I do want to point out about 1994, that when you go back and watch 95, it really makes you appreciate it and understand it, was I'm a fan of 90 seconds between the wrestlers entering. I think 2 minutes is a little bit too long. And I think, as in this case, where they did with 1995, they had to be every 60 seconds, every minute. I think that's too short. I think 90 seconds is the perfect amount of time to allow somebody to come in, get their moment to shine, and just as people are trying to settle back in, then you ramp them right back up for the next individual. It always seems to go perfectly with me when you have 90 seconds in between. I think 2 minutes, again, is too much. And then I think a minute is far too short. And you could see that here as you're watching the Rumble match because you were never allowed to really get into anything, get into anybody. There was never really a rhythm established in this match. It was too short of a Rumble match. And when it went like 38 and a half minutes, it was just too short because every 60 seconds, bam, 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 bam. And these type of things, to me, do make a big difference, especially in terms of your enjoyability of the event. But I always would look at the 1995 Royal Rumble, and I put it this way very simply. This was a two-man match, and there were basically 28 other jabronis that were just playing interference. Doesn't mean the other 28 people were jabronis per se, because there definitely were non-jabronis in that match for sure. But this match ultimately is all about Shawn Michaels and Davey Boy Smith, the British Bulldog, starting off 1 and 2 and being the last two left. They were putting on a show. This was a showcase for both of them, even with my enjoyment of it being a little bit spoiled with the every 60 seconds there's an entrance, or the Rumble match feeling like it was a little too short. The fact that these two guys started off 1 and 2, went the entire length of the show, is still something that has never truly been duplicated. And it's still awesome to go back and watch all these years later. This is another Rumble match that, in part maybe because it's less than 40 minutes, and because of the showcase with two great in-ring performers like Shawn Michaels and the British Bulldog, and it's a crime that the British Bulldog also was not in the WWE Hall of Fame. This is a showcase event. I think this is a signature moment. Unfortunately, it became a signature defining moment for the British Bulldog when he maybe should have had more. He maybe should have had a very short world title run in that company at some point in time in the mid-90s. But hey, it is what it is. This was a showcase moment here with a great finish. The whole Shawn Michaels getting thrown over, and then he's sitting there and he's balancing and he puts one foot on the ground, but he doesn't get the second foot down. British Bulldog thinks he's won, and then he hasn't won. And then Shawn Michaels wins, and this is setting up, ultimately his match at WrestleMania against Diesel for the title. The the muscle versus the man, so to speak. So when I think about this pay-per-view, I think about the beginning of WWF trying to pound Jeff Jarrett down my fucking throat but a really good Intercontinental Championship match to kick off the show. I think of the third match, the WWF Championship match between Diesel and Bret Hart, that I think is still a signature match in the career of Kevin Nash, and was just business as usual for Bret Hart, but a great match. They ended in such a poor fashion that it really ruins a lot of it. It was bad. And then I ultimately think about Shawn Michaels and British Bulldog going out there for 38 minutes and basically stealing the show and being the only two that mattered and making the Royal Rumble their bitch and their playground. That's what I think about here. So ultimately, I definitely would give this show a passing grade, and I would recommend going back and watching it because there's enough quality ring work to make this an event worth your while, which was not something you could always say during this time in the WWF's history. This is that new generation era. There was a lot of struggles going on. They were the company was struggling in so many different ways, struggling to have an identity, struggling to create huge mega stars. But this is an event that is definitely, I think, worth going back and watching pretty much from beginning to end, frankly.